Hello and welcome to Lion and Mouse Commentary. I'm Tori and this is my best friend Holland.
Hello.
If you're new to our show, we rank various forms of media by different categories out of a total score of 10, with only 2 points allowed for our personal taste. We'll break down everything as we go. You can feel free to agree, disagree, or just find something new to enjoy, but be sure to tread lightly because we do talk about hot takes and spoilers. Cut to the intro. Okay, today I chose the classic, The Sound of Music, for us to review, which was familiar to both of us. But if it's new to you, if you're like the one person out there who's never seen this, here's some background before we get into it. So, The Sound of Music was released March 2nd, 1965. It was directed and produced by Robert Wise. The screenplay was by Ernest Lemon, but it was based on the Broadway musical, which was written by Rodgers and Hammerstein of their fame. And then their musical was based on the memoir by the real Maria von Trapp. The music is the same music that was pulled from the Broadway musical. It's a running time of 174 minutes plus an intermission, and they had to do that because when your movie is almost 3 hours long, you have to give people a legit 10-minute intermission to get up and go to the bathroom.
Except now 3-hour-long movies don't do that, which is a shame.
True. It had a budget of $8.2 million and a box office of $287.8 million.
Wow.
Yeah. So the top 6 billed cast are Julie Andrews, Christopher Plummer, Richard Hayden, Peggy Wood, Charmaine Carr, and Eleanor Parker. So this is a synopsis I pulled off of IMDb. It's kind of long, so I'm going to go through it as quickly as I can. In 1930s Austria, a young woman named Maria is failing miserably in her attempt to become a nun. When Navy Captain Georg von Trapp writes to the abbey asking for a governess that can handle his 7 children, Maria is given the job. His wife is dead, he's often away, and he runs the household as strictly as he does the ships he sails on. The children are unhappy and resentful of the governesses that he keeps hiring and have managed to run each of them off. When Maria arrives, she's initially met with the same hostility, but her kindness, understanding, and sense of fun draws the children to her and brings some much-needed joy into all their lives, including the captain's. Eventually, he and Maria find themselves falling in love, even though he's already engaged to a baroness. The romance makes them both start questioning the decisions they have made, and their personal conflicts become overshadowed, however, by world events. Because Austria is about to come under Germany's control, and the captain may soon find himself drafted into the German Navy and forced to fight against his own country. So, long synopsis, but it's a long movie, so I figured it was okay. Here's just a little bit more background info, and then we'll get into our category. So The Sound of Music is one of the most commercially successful films ever. 4 weeks after its theatrical release, it became the #1 box office film in the United States from revenue generated by only 25 theaters, each screening only 10 roadshow performances per week.
Wow.
Yeah. It held the #1 position for 30 of the next 43 weeks and is the highest grossing film of 1965. A few months after its United States release, The Sound of Music opened in 261 theaters in other international countries, and it was the first American film to be completely dubbed in a foreign language, both dialogue and music. The German, French, Italian, and Spanish versions were completely dubbed. The Japanese version had Japanese dialogue with English songs, and other versions were released with foreign subtitles. The film was a popular success in every country it opened in, except the 2 countries where the story originated, Austria and West Germany.
Wow.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
It was nominated for 24 awards and won 15 of those. And one other of those awards was like a second place win. It's also been included in 6 of the top film lists from the American Film Institute. And one fun fact, the real Maria von Trapp has a brief uncredited cameo appearance in the film as a passerby, alongside her daughter Rosemary and the daughter of Werner von Trapp. They cross by Julie Andrews in the I Have Confidence number. And I learned that when I started researching for this. So,
very nice.
That being said, why don't you kick us off?
Did it win Best Picture, or did Julie Andrews win Best?
Julie Andrews did not win. Let me pull
Best
up the
Actress.
list of awards real quick.
I was just curious if it was what with the Oscars. I'm sure there's a ton of them, but
yeah, there was, like I said, there was a lot. Let me go pull them back up. So for the Academy Awards, it won Best Picture and Best Director, and it won Best Film Editing, Best Scoring of Music, and Best Sound. It was nominated for, but did not win, Best Actress, Julie Andrews, Best Supporting Actress, Peggy Wood, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, and Best Costume Design. Nominated, but didn't win. But Julie Andrews did win Best Foreign Actress at the David D. Donatello Awards, which is basically the Italian version of that.
Yeah.
And she did win a Golden Globe for this.
Nice.
And then the New York Film Critics Circle Awards was the one she got second place in for Best Actress. So yes, lots of accolades.
Wow.
But
alrighty. So for our first category for movies, it is plot and story delivery, and we include musicals, the musical numbers as far as they contribute to the plot. We count that in plot and story delivery because usually they're moving the plot forward. Although if there are songs that give you insight into characters, we can talk about it in characters. And of course, the sound, like auditory appeal of the music, we can obviously include that in our category of aesthetics. So plot and story delivery, total possible score of 2 for movies. I give this 1.5 points out of 2. So one thing I did kind of keep in mind with this story overall is that it is a very long film. It is 2 hours and 54 minutes long, so almost 3 full hours of content. I think that probably includes the intermission in there.
I don't think so, actually.
Oh, okay.
I think that's...
So without the intermission,
yeah,
just
the intermission
film
was like 8 minutes or 10 minutes or something.
Gotcha.
Like
so
that.
Just the film
So
content.
over 3 hours, I think, after that.
Yeah. So it's a lot is going on in this story, but I do think that the presentation of the plot is still relatively linear and easy to follow. It's not like we have all of these multiple plot lines dumped on us at the beginning. We're given the setup with Maria. We follow her. She's a governess for these children. We follow that relationship. We follow her relationship with the captain. Then we bring in there are threads of kind of what Nazi Germany is doing, but then we move into that as kind of the culmination of the story. So I think that all of those individual plot lines are given their due screen time, and when we've kind of wrapped up the core of the story, we move on to the next point. So I do think that, yes, it is very long, but I think it's presented to the audience in a way that's really easy to follow. I do think the kind of themes of the film, I'm not going to get too into. I was not a literature person growing up, so I'm not going to be like super poetic about this, but I do think the film is called The Sound of Music, and the opening number of The Hills Are Alive, which I'll talk about in aesthetics as well, but the opening number, The Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Music, it really does present this theme that music in and of itself is going to have impact on various aspects of this film. And I think that opening number gives us a great setup that music has an impact on Maria as an individual, and then we continue that theme. It has an impact on her relationship with these kids. Like, literally music, she teaches them how to sing. And then Edelweiss, for the captain and the people of Austria, has this message of not necessarily defiance, although you could argue that, but it has this theme.
It's a very almost just like a patriotic.
Yes, I would say a pretty patriotic theme, and then music is used as a distraction for the Von Trapps to escape. And even in the church, we have the nuns singing, or the Franciscan monks or whoever they are singing, how music has impact throughout the story on individuals, on families, on relationships, on culture, on the populace of a nation, etc. And I think that's a pretty well delivered theme without it being overly sentimental or overly like esoteric or like trying to be this like higher than
lofty
idea,
like
philosophical airy concept that like you wouldn't get it because it's art. Like
Yeah.
it just, we are all, I believe, human beings in general do find a connection with music, whatever that looks like for each individual. And so I think that as a theme is really well delivered in this film. I'm not going to get into like a ton of details in this story because, like I said, it is a very long film. I do think that the presentation of the story does have a very stage musical feel. So that adaptation from the source material of a Broadway show was in, I believe I looked it up, it was 1959 was when the original stage musical was on Broadway, and this is 1965 when this film was released. I also think that the setup of these kind of general tropes in today's lens do seem very overdone and overplayed. So like Maria being this kind of misfit nun who doesn't fit in, she finds her way. These kids are parented by a really strict father, and then she comes in and brings this softness, and then she changes him. She like softens him and they fall in love. Like the parent figure falling in love with the governess, you know, falling in love with the maid, falling in love with the teacher. Like all of those stories can be very sappy and sentimental. And I think we do have to say in 2025, it could be very bland. And I think a lot of films on the back riding the success of this story, we've seen it repeated in film like archetypes. But I do think this film may not necessarily have done it first because they are very common stories that really do happen. But looking at it in 2025, it is a little bit overplayed. So some negatives with those tropes, I think that this whole story with Max, Uncle Max, and then the Baroness coming in and like, oh, the captain's gonna marry the Baroness. Oh, Maria, now she thinks that, oh my gosh, but I'm in love with him, but I shouldn't be because I'm a nun. And this whole will they, won't they plot, it is really heavy-handed. I think you could almost argue it's not really necessary for the story. I think those bigger themes that are kind of the through line, that music, the sound of music, like follows that through line, makes this like will they, won't they romance between the captain, the Baroness, and Maria really unnecessary for the story, but it works. It adds drama. So I didn't too strongly discredit the story for that, but I did think that was relatively worth noting. Kind of halfway through the plot with this Uncle Max, this Uncle Max character, which we're never really told, like, is he really an uncle? Do the kids just call him that? Like, whatever. I get the impression he's not actually related to anybody. They just call him Uncle Max because he's this fun, like...
He's just been around
rascally
forever, yeah.
man that comes in and he's friends with the captain. The whole thing with him looking for a singing group, like... That's like the most random thing of all time. He's like, I have to find a singing group for the festival. Oh, who will it be? Oh, wow, the Von Trapp kids. Oh, now the whole family. Like, it's almost eye-rollingly corny at this point. Again, like 2025, it doesn't really age super well. It seems a little hokey. It seems more like a sitcom plot than like a film plot. The part where Maria leaves the kids, I think it's right around intermission when she leaves.
I believe so, yes.
It's just like super abrupt. She's just like, the Baroness has this one conversation. She's literally changing to go down to the party because the captain and Max have invited her. And then the Baroness says like 4 things, like calls her out for being in love with this man that the Baroness clearly is like intended to marry. And she's like, okay, bye, and just
guess
like
I'll leave.
Leaves. Like she leaves a note on the fireplace. The lobby that was once packed full of people is now miraculously cleared out, and she's just gone. I thought that part was just like that happened real fast. Like we had to just hurry up and end it. We couldn't have like any rational thoughts or conversations that would have been a little bit more realistic. We're like, nope, she's gone. She just goes back to the Abbey like immediately. It was like one dance. That one, like, folk dance with the captain just immediately changed everything. Like, that's a pretty drastic moment that in one dance changed everything. I guess you could argue that was the music that changed everything, you know, but I thought that was a little abrupt. She took her guitar with her, like she walks out the door with it. And then in the next scene where the kids are all sad because Maria's gone and they're playing a song, they're singing the dirge version of The Hills Are Alive, Liesl just miraculously has Maria's guitar back. So I have a theory
about this real quick.
Okay,
let me interject.
Go for it.
In the earlier scene, the first scene where the song Edelweiss is introduced, the captain, Maria hands her guitar to the captain and he knows how to play it. So my assumption is that he has a guitar somewhere. It's just maybe been tucked away because he
hated music
because of the grief of his wife's passing, and he didn't want music in the house, which is another reason why he tells Maria, like, don't be poking into places that are off limits or whatever.
That's fair.
So my assumption was that there is a guitar somewhere in the house. It just hadn't been touched in a while.
Yep. Another thing plot wise I thought was a little corny was the whole part where Maria's back at the Abbey and she's like telling the Reverend Mother that she's like really confused and she wants to be a nun, and you know that has certain requirements, and she wants to do like God's will, and she loves these children and she loves the captain, and the Reverend Mother is like, well, you know, just because you love God doesn't mean you can't love these people. Like, it's okay. And she's like, but I don't know what to do. I'm so confused. And then Reverend Mother just starts bursting into song. It's like a big iconic moment.
Yeah.
But the song's great. But the whole message of the song is just climb every mountain until you find your dream. And my thought process when I was watching it for this podcast was, she doesn't know what her dream is. Like,
it almost felt like the Reverend Mother was projecting a little bit. Like, she had her own regrets. Like, I didn't chase my dreams, so you need to.
Right, but it's like Maria's whole point of this, like, confliction. It's like,
I don't know what my dream is now.
I don't know what my dream is. I have these two opposing dreams. And Reverend Mother's just like, just go climb every mountain until you figure out which one it is. Which... fair point, but also not helpful.
Not in this moment.
So, but again, it's an iconic song, so you can't be that mad about it. So those were some like negatives. Again, I feel like a lot of it is just attributed to age. However, I think the musical numbers, as far as the way that they deliver the plot, are just done really, really well. I think, like, for example, the song about Maria's favorite things is a great, like, well, let me back up. First of all, with Maria's characters revealed to us, this is a little bit in characters, but it's the way the story's delivered to us, so I'm going to talk about it in plot. But Maria's established as our character in The Hills Are Alive, and then we move into How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria? I don't know the titles of these songs either, so sorry. But then we move into How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria, which is her perspective, the perspective of her from this environment of the Abbey, and she's just really is a misfit, kind of this fish out of water, which again is a little tropey, but it works really well in this context. And then, so we're seeing like more of who Maria is, and then we move into where she sings about her favorite things with the Von Trapp children, and I think it's such a great way of showing her character. It continues in the veins of Maria's character and it fits her, and now we get to see her interact as who she is genuinely with these kids. And I think the plot device of the thunderstorm, which is a really easy way to like put these kids in like a quote unquote threatening situation where Maria has to fit in that role of like a more maternal role of these kids. It's just very clever setup of that whole, you know, several opening numbers, which makes it very believable that Maria has these genuine connections with these kids versus her coming in and suddenly being this like sickly, syrupy sweet or like almost over the top fake, like overly loving, like instant mom character. It just, we're revealed who these people are and who these protagonists are and what their needs are just in a gradual way. And so that might be, you know, more of a character, but because we're talking about musical numbers, I kind of wanted to mention that here. And then also the way that the Nazi German plot is just this nice through line. It's kind of like building and like simmering under the surface. It doesn't feel completely blindsided where we have that at the end of the story. And then with the musical number specifically, I think the song reprises are so well done. They all have a little bit of a change to them lyrically so that we're given the setup and then we've watched our characters have some growth or the events change. And now that the events have changed and our people have changed, this song reprised is used as a way to kind of put the other bookend on the other end. And so this concept that was introduced to us, for example, 16 going on 17, was introduced to us as to kind of who Liesel was. And then we're given, this musical number is given to us as a character note, and it's like given to us as to how she's changed and grown and how her insight of her life and situation has changed. So again, that kind of, the example I gave is kind of more of a character note, but with every reprise, it's whatever theme or concept we have been given with the first version, we are followed through and have more resolution with the reprise versus some musicals that they just throw the reprise in there because that song was catchy, let's sing it again. Or, hey, this character is, sad and remembering what we talked about in the reprise, which I think is very easy to do in musicals, but I think the way this musical does it is just very, I don't want to say mature, but it is has a little bit more depth to the use of those reprises. And so I really appreciated that. That's the majority of what I have as far as notes go. But overall, I think it's a really well done plot. There's a lot of moving pieces and it's delivered in a very digestible manner. So there are moments I think through modern lenses, it's a little overplayed. There's tropey moments. It's a little corny in places. I think you could argue that the plot's a little sentimental, and, kind of sappy. But I think in its time, it works well. So, and it's a musical. It's musical theater. It's not necessarily going to be this overly dramatic, like intense drama. So 1.5 points out of 2.
Awesome. So for me, for plot and story delivery, I also gave this 1.5 points out of 2. I want to start out by saying that I have never read the original memoir. However, I fully understand that this depiction of the Von Trapp family is not 100% accurate. So, knowing that the family was real and existed and parts of the story were true, the fact that they, that Maria Von Trapp was their governess who was originally tending to be a nun, that they were a traveling singing family, like all those are elements that are true. But there are lots of creative liberties from what I understand.
For sure.
In the Broadway musical and the movie. So that's just kind of like a blanket that I just wanted to throw on everything. I love that the way this story builds things, it's very foundationally layered. And I don't think that is a bad thing at all. The story starts incredibly simple. You've got this girl, she wants to be a nun. She's not doing great at it. So they need to find another thing for her to do, a way for her to be useful. I think it's a very relatable thing to be like, this is not working. I need to change. How can I use my skill set or whatever? So it's very simple. She goes to this family. They've been going through the governesses. She has her work cut out for her. And she has to adapt and blah, 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 blah. The story does get deeper and I wouldn't say more complicated, but the stakes do rise. The conflicts become greater. But I love that they take the time to give us true, genuine character bonding before they throw the big guns at you. And what happens because they do this is because as a conflict arises, we already have these very established dynamics That we're not going, well, now this seems inconsistent, or now this character change seems very drastic, which there are some mentions of that you've mentioned, like Maria just up and leaving after one conversation with the Baroness. But for the most part, I think that by the time things start to become more tense in whatever capacity that is, whether that's, you know, the romantic tension between Maria and the captain, or the government political tension of literal Nazi Germany moving in to occupy Austria, those sorts of things, the guns become bigger, the stakes become higher as we go. And by the time we're combating those things, we don't have to do any more character building at that point, because that's already been taken care of in the earlier parts of the movie. And I like that, because by that point, I have trust in the characters that I'm watching to overcome whatever they're overcoming. They don't have to do that growth in that moment. Part of that probably is the fact that this is 3 hours long, so they could take their time. Not every movie has that kind of time, but I like how it works in this movie. That sort of like foundational building. I really like that. Most of this movie feels like a very slice of life sitcom almost sometimes. And I like that it holds a good bit of levity, because the perspective of our lead, the character of Maria, this is a character note, but it does affect the plot. Because she's our protagonist, we see a lot of everything from her perspective or influence, maybe not perspective because it's not like it's first person, but her influence. And Maria is at her core a pretty positive person. And while she has her moments of doubt and insecurity and those sorts of things, for the most part, she brings a very optimistic perspective to most everything. And I like that it kind of lifts the heavy themes of grief and loss, which are the big heavy themes in the beginning. And then it switches into, you know, this sort of political love of homeland being, you know, shaken, kind of like those heavier themes that happen when Nazi Germany starts to become more prevalent in the story. And I think that you need the levity of a character perspective like Maria in order to tell this story and not be depressed the whole time through. Mm-hmm. I think if you switched and everything was shown from the perspective of Captain Von Trapp, there would be much fewer moments of joy in this story. And so the moments of joy that we see happen in, you know, at first in the Von Trapp children and then to Captain Von Trapp. Those moments weigh heavier because we haven't been down in the dumps for 2 of the 3 hours of this movie or whatever it is. So I like that this sort of feels kind of slice of lifey. I think it does lend itself to some cornier moments because of that levity, but I think it's necessary in order to package this story in a very palatable way. And I think they've managed that balance incredibly well. I think that there are some pointless side plots, though. The Baroness is one of them, and I personally think that Liesel's off-on romance with Rolf is also unnecessary. The song 16 Going on 17 is iconic and everybody loves it, and I like it too. It's a good song, but it's really not necessary for the only necessity I could argue is for the character growth of Liesel individually. But outside of that, it really doesn't have
I would say, I think for plot, I think you could say yes. However, I do think it is important because Liesel is, I'll talk about this in characters a little bit, but Liesel is that touch point for Maria when she first comes. And so her kind of secret romance she has with Rolf is a pretty big connection point for Liesel. And it opens us in the plot to see that Maria wants to be an advocate for these kids. She could have just ratted out Liesel right away.
I agree.
And I also think with Rolf later on in the film, like being part of the Nazi youth or whatever, I think that is somewhat necessary for a plot well, maybe not necessary, but I think it's utilized to show that the insidiousness of the Third Reich impacted the average person. It wasn't just these dictators coming into town and hanging flags in the street. It was your telegram boy is now willing to turn in the father and the family of a girl he allegedly loves. So I think that if this, but I could agree, I would concede. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I would think that you could concede that this movie isn't all about the invasion of the Nazis into Austria.
Right.
So it's not necessary for the story of Maria, but I do think it does help build more of the world and flesh out more of the conflict.
I think every plot line does deepen the world. I will agree to that. But I think that you could have replaced the character of Rolf with any other character and could have accomplished the same things.
I think you could have, yeah.
I'm just saying that specifically this sort of like pining that Liesel has after Rolf is kind of unnecessary. It doesn't do a ton. Because I think his character could be replaceable at the end of the day. And maybe that's more of a character note, but I just feel like those two plot lines, you could take them out and still accomplish everything that the movie accomplishes.
I think so too. I think you're right. I think you are correct in that perspective, but I think that the reason that those plots, and even the Baroness, I think that I think it's unnecessary, but I think it remains in the movie because it just helps round out your world and your characters.
I agree. I wouldn't necessarily get rid of them if I were to like rewrite them, but I just think that compared to everything else, they really don't serve as much of a furtherance to the story as everybody else, or that everything else does.
They're like loose threads, I think.
Yeah, they're filler plots, which is fine, you know.
Which feels a sitcom, it'd be a B plot.
Yeah, exactly. So, I do think that one scene that is really significant, and I wasn't sure whether to talk about this in plot or characters because I think it shifts a lot of things for both areas, and it's the scene where, the children are singing for the Baroness for the first time and Uncle Max, and the captain walks in and like has this like moment where he joins them in song, and you can see the children's surprise because it's been however long, at least since Gretel was born, that he's participated in any sort of music. And so you see this significant shift on everybody in that room of how this song, this singing has impacted the captain. And I think that moment is so pivotal because at that point, the participation and the dynamic of the captain to everybody, not just his children and Maria, changes, which changes how the rest of the plot moves forward because there's less resistance in the family. And I think it's a really, really great moment. Plus, here, every time Christopher Plummer sings Edelweiss in that scene, I get choked up. It doesn't matter how many times I've seen that movie. That moment is just so like impactful to me, and I freaking love it. I also think they do a lot of really good plot moments that are like, they could be like missables or like throwaways, but I think if you're paying attention, they mean a lot. A big example is when later in the story, Maria and the captain have gotten married. They come back from their honeymoon and there is a Nazi flag hanging on their front door, and the captain says nothing. He just pulls it down and rips it in half. And you could miss that if it's like 14 seconds or something, but it's really impactful at establishing the fact that Captain Von Trapp and his family are not in support of the occupation that's moving in, despite having peers of his And so I think moments like that are really important in the plot, as brief as they may be, because I think they bring a level of like satisfaction. They bring a level of, from an audience perspective, where you're rooting a little bit harder just because of that moment. You know, and I think small moments, even just like at the end of My Favorite Things, when, you know, you kind of mentioned this, where when the captain comes in and he's like, I thought I told you that bedtime is to be strictly enforced. And Maria covers for them. And these are the same kids that just gave her grief all throughout the day. They put a pine cone on her chair. They put a frog in her hand, or whatever it was.
Her pocket.
Yeah. It's like, these kids have been pranking you for hours. And now Dad's in the room and he's about to lay down the law. And she would have been within her right to be like, yeah, okay, they broke the rules. But instead, she stepped forward as their advocate or as their ally. And, you know, not to be in super defiance to the captain, but just to kind of, Maria is a very pick your battles kind of character. And we see that a lot in different plot moments. And I think it's one of the reasons why the captain really doesn't get on her too hard for a lot of these things, because I think at the end of the day, he realizes that his rules may be too strict for children. And the children on the opposite side want to be children, and so they respond positively to being allowed to having the allowance to be children. So I think all of those things together just make a really, really satisfying plot. That's basically all I have to say. I do agree with a lot of what you said as well, so 1.5 points out of 2.
Alrighty, so for our next category of characters, we have a total of 3 possible points, and I actually gave this 2 out of 3. To be perfectly honest, if Julie Andrews and the character of Maria was the only character, I would give it full points, because she does a fabulous job. Julie Andrews does a great job. I think
Julie Andrews is a treasure.
She is an international treasure. So she does a fantastic job. You can go listen to our episode of The Princess Diaries to hear us talk about Julie Andrews in that episode as well. So shameless plug for that episode.
We should do Mary Poppins.
I know. This movie actually did come out about a year after Mary Poppins. So I do think there is a little close similarities between Maria and Mary Poppins. Their name is even really similar. So there are some things. She does meet the character herself, aside from Julie Andrews' performance of the character. She is relatively stereotypical by today's standards, I think. She's this misfit. She doesn't fit in, but she, she's this troublemaker at the Abbey. She's a woman that like knows her own mind when it comes to going up against the captain. But then what I think this movie does well, with everything I just listed, I think is groaningly annoying in so many female protagonists. And what they do with Maria that I think makes her a more realistic and complex character is she's this misfit in the Abbey. She causes all this trouble, but she's so eager to please and to do what's right. She wants to follow the rules. She wants to be a good nun. She wants to like follow God's will and be devoted to the Abbey. And she's so kind and eager to do the right thing. And then she knows her own mind. And like you said, like you kind of mentioned, she has these moments where she goes up against the captain, but she's never domineering. She's never overbearing. She's never trying to put him down so that she can rise up above him. She's just this steady, quiet, standing for what she believes is right. And I'm not going to whistle for these kids. Whistles are not for children, and they're definitely not for me. I only have trouble observing bedtime during thunderstorms. And then the big, culmination, she's willing to call them out that these children want to be loved and they need you.
And you don't even know them.
And they want you around. And that's the only reason they do what they do. And you don't even know your own children. And, he tells her she can pack her things and go, and she's fully prepared to do that because she's not going to, sit down on the floor and protest, so she has these moments of complexity where she's such an admirable character and she has such conviction, but she still has kindness and compassion. And like you said, she picks her battles. She's not going to yell and scream at everything that she thinks it should be her way. She has this softness and hardness when the situation needs it to be. She holds her own with the captain and the kids. So the first where she's talking about how I was so warm and everyone was so welcoming.
And all the kids just burst into tears out of guilt. Completely
different tactic from yelling at the captain after they fall out of the canoe or whatever. She even sings at the beginning of, the song I Have Confidence. Like she longs for adventure. She wants to try something new. Again, a super overplayed trope for a lot of protagonists and female protagonists included. But then she's like, but why am I so scared? Like, I'm terrified. I don't even know if this is going to work out. And, she's so just this complexity of this character where she feels very human and very relatable in a way that I think is not done very commonly. I think a lot of literature and films think that a female protagonist has to only have those like strong aggressive qualities and they can't have this softness because it's contradictory. And I think the character of Maria in this story is very well developed in that she has both and is able to use both tactfully. So, and then Julie Andrews' portrayal keeps it very real and human. She has this optimism without being overly sunny and sappy. And so kudos to the character of Maria, because you need somebody with a little bit of depth and roundness and, softness and hardness to be able to carry a film like this. The Reverend Mother, she's in the film very briefly, but she is introduced pretty early. I like that she's this kind of matriarchal character who cares about her responsibility to the community of the Abbey, and yet she also cares for the welfare of Maria. And then we have this interesting complexity, which again I think if this movie was made today, it would not be handled with this this care, is that the Reverend Mother makes it very clear that being a nun is not a moral superiority. You are not a better person because you're a nun. God calls us all to different things, and his work that he has for us to do may be being a mother to these children. And so I think in today, they would have made this Reverend Mother, in 2025, they probably would have made the Reverend Mother character almost antagonistic against Maria and telling her that you could never be a nun, that I'm kicking you out. And then when she comes back,
you didn't make it.
You failed, you couldn't make it. And you know what? You don't deserve to be a nun anyways, because we're doing God's work here and you can't take it, so you're going to go be a mom. That's, which I think is one, completely wrong, objectively, but then also it's such an easy route to take, and then it would completely make you wonder, why would Maria want to be part of this abbey anyways? Why does she want to be a nun? Everybody that's a nun is so mean, but they're not. They're all very compassionate people. It's just very respectfully handles the characters are all, I believe, very respectfully handled with this film.
Yeah, I have a couple notes like that too that I'll talk about.
I do think though that there are an unfortunate amount of weak characters in this film. We've already kind of I'm not going to hash too much into it, but the character of Uncle Max, he's so random. Who is this guy? What is his thing? What is his deal? He does seem to be this kind of go along to get along kind of guy when it comes to the festival at the end, but he's willing to help the Von Trapp family escape Austria. So he's clearly a good guy, but clearly not as convicted as the Von Trapp family to flee the country. But still, he's really random. I don't know why he's in this movie half the time, except that he has this convenient plot of trying to find a singing group, and then, oh, look, the Van Trapp family. The Baroness is a complete stereotype. It doesn't make any sense to me that she seems to genuinely care about the captain, and she doesn't seem unkind. When she's talking with him one-on-one, she seems to genuinely like this guy. And then but then you can't really blame her for having that conversation with Maria, like, look, I'm not blind. I can tell that you two have fallen for each other. But then why would she like press it upon Maria to leave if she's just going to kind of turn around to the captain and be like, you know what? I've got lots of money. I can have anybody I want. You clearly don't love me. So bye. Like, why didn't we just...
Now he's just lonely.
Like, why didn't we just start with that?
Yeah.
Like, you know, so I felt like that whole like plot was, again, just that whole character note was just for plot convenience. But then we try and set her up as like this evil stepmother because she's going to send the kids off to boarding school. And you're like, okay, well, which is it? Like, what, like, we're just picking off the shelf, like the evil stepmother tropes. And it's just very, very weak. Kind of nonsensical. I feel like it was just to have a will they, won't they plot line. I think Liesel and Rolf are pretty weak characters in the sense they really don't have a lot of screen time. But I do think the relationship of the two of them together is a pretty decent portrayal of kind of this young, like, teen idealized love. And then we watch, kind of like I mentioned with the reprise of 16 going on 17 between Liesel and Maria, that there is a little bit of growth and maturity on Liesel's end. And then she and Rolf kind of have grown apart. And then you find out he's this, you know, villain. And then, you know, it's clearly not going to work out. He's willing to kind of alert the guards where you are and get you arrested and, you know, maybe worse. But I think that it adds a lot of fullness to the overall story that this is affecting people on an individual level, but it really isn't this super strong, like, deep character development. I do think the relationship between Liesel and Maria is a nice, like, note because, kind of segueing into, the majority of the other kids are just cardboard cutouts. They're just generic kid number, like, 2 through like 7. They really don't have a whole lot of personality. Maria rattles off to the captain all these like personality traits or things she knows about the kids, which is great for her character development.
But we don't see a lot of that.
Right. And so the kids are just very generic kids, mischievous little like gremlins causing trouble, and then sweet singing little angels. That's about it. So none of the kids really have any depth. That's why I do think Liesel has to have something, because Maria has to be able to connect with one child. Otherwise you're like, well, she didn't really, I mean, all she did was teach him to sing do re mi and then that's it. So I do think it's necessary for the plot, but character wise it's pretty weak. And then kind of finally, the last like character I'll talk about, and probably the biggest reason that I didn't give this full points, was the captain is a very flat character. He is presented as this very stoic, like stern man. And then he, you know, it makes sense conceptually. He's this widower, he's grieving, this is his way of dealing with loss. His interactions with the Baroness seem to kind of humanize him, and he seems like he can, you know, lighten and soften a little bit talking one-on-one with her, and he seems to have a little bit more of this kind of softness, like he needs a woman in his life to kind of bring him back to life, if you will, which is reasonable, I guess. But then the way that he just flips to Maria so fast, he seems to have this genuine relationship with the Baroness. He apparently, we've been told he leaves for a month at a time and goes and visits her and like spends time with her. And then literally it took one song, The Hills Are Alive, to suddenly wake him up, and now he loves music again and he's this great dad. He's like model dad now. And then it took one folk dance with Maria, and now, oh, I love her instead. And it's just, he completely changes. Like, he has this, like, oops, I've changed moment where, like, oh, I heard this one song that my kid sang, and boom, I love music again. And then I'm gonna marry the Baroness. And then I dance one song with Maria, and boom, I'm a completely different man. And I think with a 3-hour-long movie, we could have done a little bit more to give him a little bit more depth and give us a little more insight into why. Like, we have no understanding of why he even likes the Baroness or Maria. Like, why would he prefer Maria over the Baroness. All we are basically told is that it's just strictly emotional feeling that he loves her and she loves him, but we don't really see any reason of why their relationship or affection for each other even exists other than the fact that they're just in love. And so I think that this movie does a really good job of having these complexities and characters. I feel like the romance between the captain and Maria should have had a little bit of time to have that complexity as well, versus this literally like getting hit over the head with a Cupid's arrow and now all of a sudden they're in love. And now all of a sudden he's a good dad. So those two things I think are very weak character moments, especially when your main like character is like the love interest for your protagonist is that character that's so weak. But I do think that he has zero complexity, but we do when it comes to his relationship with Maria and even his relationship with his kids, but we do see a good amount of complexity and nuance in how his perspective is about his country of Austria and his care for his country and his patriotism for his country. We're given a lot of nuance and depth, and we get to watch this man stand for what's right and stand for, you know, the real Austria and defy, you know, Nazi Germany and be willing to flee the country so he doesn't have to serve in their military and fight against his own people. Like, those are all huge, like, just bold, integrity-filled depth of character moments for the captain. And we learn more about him with him singing Edelweiss at the end of the film than we do throughout the entire film with his relationship with his kids and Maria, which was our starting point for this film. So I think we deserved a little bit more than that, but I do think the film still works as is. I mean, it's a delightful film, but I do think objectively there's a lack of depth with his character. I do, though, have to commend Christopher Plummer because I feel like I've seen a couple, like, community theater presentations of The Sound of Music, and it's so easy to make the captain character like a cardboard cutout stereotype of just I'm angry all the time and I'm gonna yell and blow my whistle and stomp around, and then now I'm gonna sing a romance song. And I think Christopher Plummer does a really good job of keeping the captain from feeling like a cardboard cutout. Although I think if you're objectively analyzing the film, you can see some parts that are lacking. But Christopher Plummer's presentation of that character is pretty solid. So 2 out of 3 points.
Okay. So for me, for characters, I gave this 2.5 points out of 3. So I don't have quite as many negatives as you, but I do have a few. So I'll just start with Maria. I think Maria is such a wonderful character. She's so wonderful. And Julie Andrews really did everything that I would have dreamt if I was casting this film. I don't know if there's a better choice than Julie Andrews. One thing I find really interesting is how Maria goes at the very beginning of the movie. She goes from being the kid of the Abbey, by all dynamic purposes, to being the Baroness of 7 kids, and yet she's still very much
She's not a Baroness.
I'm sorry. Governess. Governess. She goes from being the kid of the Abbey to the governess of these 7 kids, and yet she's still just unapologetically herself in both instances. And I love a character who can adapt to different dynamics and different contexts, and it doesn't feel like now I'm watching 2 different people. Even when Maria leaves and goes back to the Abbey halfway through the movie, she never feels like 2 drastically different versions of herself. Obviously, people have different facets of themselves. We've talked about this in many, many episodes of ours when we talk about characters, is that all people have different facets that come to the surface depending on the situation or the people you're around or the context that you're in or whatever. And so I'm not saying there is none of that, but I just love how consistently Maria is all the time. And a lot of her character aspects that you mentioned are just very true. And I think that there is this risk with the character of Maria that she could become almost too repetitious because of that. And the way that Julie Andrews portrays her, there is none of that. There is no like boringness to her consistency, and I really love that. I like that the kids grow as a unit. I do agree that I think that we should have had, with 3 hours of movie, some more individual growth and even just like learning of the kids, see glimpses of who they are as people and how they are changing as they grow up. I don't know how much time is supposed to have passed really before, like between the beginning of the movie and the end. I don't know if that's supposed to be like a year or two. I don't really have a great grasp of like how much time is moving throughout the story. But
I feel like we could probably say it's less than a year. And I'm not saying that they would change the lyrics, but Liesl still sings that she's 16 going on 17.
That's fair.
So we could just assume that it all happens within the span of a year.
Yeah. But at least I do see growth in the kids as a unit in regards to how they treat Maria, how they treat their father, how they treat the Baroness when Maria steps out of the picture and, you know, their father tells them, we're getting married. And I think if that had happened at the beginning of the story, the kids would have thrown a fit. They would have not responded in a appropriate or respectful way. And yet at the point in the story where that happens, you can tell they're not thrilled, but they do respond passively and respectfully, despite how they may be feeling internally. And I think that does show some growth, at least as a unit. But I also think it's great to see them embracing their youth. Like at the beginning of the film when he whistles for all of them and they march down the stairs and they introduce themselves in this lineup. And that's so different than the kids we see an hour from then in the just like the span of the movie. So I really like seeing them kind of embracing their childhood and also softening in all of the ways that they should as children and acting less like sailors and more like kids. And that's the kind of thing I like to see. I agree with what you said about the Baroness. I really don't think that she is a bad woman or a villain at all.
Yeah.
She simply does not, at the end of the day, fit the role she's trying to fit. Whether that's anybody's fault or not. She stepped into this role. Maybe she fit that for a time. You know, this role of companion, even like girlfriend perhaps to the Baroness. She filled that for a time. And then as things progress, as life happens, they realize that it wasn't fitting the way it should. You know, maybe she admitted she didn't feel like a mother. She didn't feel like a mother to the kids, or that was something she really wanted to pursue or you know, work towards, as this sort of bond. And you can see her trying at a few points. Like she does give a little bit of an effort. And then you can kind of see in her face that like, this is not me. It's not who she is. And so I really just think that there's no real problem with the Baroness other than we're just watching a woman who fits with the captain perhaps, but doesn't assimilate into his world very well.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons that the captain ends up preferring Maria, is because he's realizing that Maria has assimilated to their family for a while now, and she's doing that swimmingly. And this other lady that he likes and perhaps makes logical sense for him to, you know, get married to, you know, this was back in the time of where a lot of marriages were based on convenience and logistics and not so, you know, not always on emotion, although I'm sure that was, bless you.
I'm sorry.
Although I'm sure that was obviously, you know, prevalent at the time too. So I think that might be a reason that Captain Von Trapp ends up preferring Maria, is because the Baroness is just not assimilating well into his life outside of when he leaves his home, he can assimilate to her life, but it's not translating the same way back. And I think that's not a fault of anybody. It's just something that happened, and I think is part of the reason of their sort of like dissolving. But I don't think it makes her a bad woman by any means.
I think that is probably true of these characters. However, I do think it's interesting now that you say that. There is a conversation between the captain and the Baroness where she's talking about the mountains and the lake and everything, and he's like, oh, you've seen one mountain, you've seen them all. Like, you prefer this to, you know, palaces and champagne and chandeliers and like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And she's kind of like, no, not really. And so it's like, if they had just flipped it the other way around, I feel like it would have been more believable that they may like each other, but they're not of the same world. Like, she's not, because I feel like, I think you're correct in saying that, but I wish that, kind of like my point, I wish we were given more reason. I feel like we could have just had another conversation like that where the captain realizes, like, I need a woman that's going to be part of my whole world.
Yeah.
And that includes my kids.
Yeah.
You know?
Kids, home, Austria,
yeah.
you know, all these things. I think that Captain Von Trapp is obviously a good man. We see all of the moral pillars that we want to from him. We see his loyalty to his, you know, country. We see eventually, I'll get to that, you know, the rekindling of affection for his children. You know, we see all of the moral pillars. I think the problem with Captain Von Trapp is that he, in the story progression, he is in grief mode for a little too long. And what that does is it makes him so emotionally distant that his stoicism is now a downfall to him. And by the time that he warms up, the switch up is too fast. It's crazy. It's a little bipolar. He comes in stoic as that, like the first time we ever see him warm up is this conversation with the Baroness. And then brings her into the house, and then he walks in and his kids are singing and he's like, I'm a changed man, kind of like you mentioned. And it's like the switch up is just a little crazy. We needed to have steps before this. And some people could argue, well, there's a few moments where he, like, Maria says something to him and she walks away and you can see he's contemplating, but it's not evident enough. We need more evidence that he is warming up to the idea of reconnecting to his family. And it really doesn't even happen fully until Maria freaks out on him after falling out of the canoe. And that's the moment that he actually, like, anything clicks in his head. Everything before that is just kind of like emotional warmth, and it's not actual intentional warmth. And I think with a character like Captain Von Trapp, in order to make the romance believable and his affection for his children feel a little bit more genuine, you need to have more intention and not so much emotion, because anybody can be emotional. But emotions are really difficult to foundationally build things on, because as human beings, our emotions can change on a dime. Mm-hmm. In seconds, we can change our minds about things if we're thinking emotionally. But if we are intentional, then it reveals not our emotion, but our goal. And so there's very little intention behind the captain's, like, just connection with everybody, really, until it starts to happen with Edelweiss, but it really doesn't click until they have their confrontation. Mm-hmm. and Maria ends up, you know, leaving again or whatever, or leaving, right? Is that where they leave? Where she leaves?
No, she leaves. No, she explodes at him after she falls out of the canoe, and then he hears the kids singing "The Hills Are Alive," and then he sings
Edelweiss.
He sings Edelweiss way later, after the Lonely Goat Herd. And then he sings Edelweiss after the Lonely Goat Herd. And she's like, it's your turn, Captain. And they're like, can we really keep the puppet show, Uncle Max? And they say, yeah. And then she's like, it's your turn, Captain. And then they have the ball, and then Maria leaves after that.
Yeah, so, but all of that to say, that happens like an hour and 20 minutes in, or an hour and 30 minutes in. We're halfway through the film now. Mm-hmm. And Captain Von Trapp is arguably the second biggest character in this entire movie. And I think that his emotional distance for so much of it, which you can explain it. Like, it's grief. Like, that's what it is. If we were going to boil it down, that's what it is. But it's there too long. And I hate to say that, because in a real life situation, I would never be like, that person's grieving too long. But I'm talking in the context of this story, it does him a disservice, because now he almost seems too emotional once that stoicism breaks. He's making decisions too emotionally. He's like wavering too much. Anyway, the only other note that I have is the character of Rolf. I genuinely think he kind of sucks. Not because of any reason other than he is given, in my opinion, multiple chances to change his mind.
Oh, completely.
And he continuously makes the wrong one.
Completely.
And so I get frustrated.
At the beginning of the film, he's already sympathizing.
Right.
So he started at the beginning.
And he's already sort of playing with Liesel at the beginning, too. Mm-hmm. So you really don't even have a clear understanding of his intentions toward Liesel. She has hope, and he likes being liked.
Yeah.
And that's their dynamic. Mm-hmm. And it sucks, because you see it happen all the time. And with adult couples too, it's like you have one person and they really like you, and you really like being liked. So you're going to play the game. And then when all of a sudden it's more important to you to go be a Nazi, she doesn't matter to you. She doesn't.
Well, but I also feel like you knew she didn't really matter to him when he basically said, basically something about her father, and she's like, what about my father? He's like, he's just so Austrian. And so he clearly doesn't have any respect for her father, from
her upbringing or heritage, like any of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my Rolf sucks.
He does suck. I'm not gonna disagree. He is a sucky character, and I don't like him. He's a bad dude.
Yeah. So all of that to say 2.5 points out of 3 for me for characters.
The character of Rolf always makes me think of that movie. Can't remember if it was a Disney movie or not, but it was called The Pacifier, and it had Vin Diesel in it. And he's like Maria von Trapp babysitting these kids, and then the oldest son is Rolf in The Sound of Music. Yeah. And he's like trying to hide the fact that he's in a musical, and then he shows up with his hair dyed blonde, and they find like part of his costume in his locker.
Yeah. And they like think that he's
joined a gang.
Yeah. He's like a threat to the government or local community.
And then they find out that, nope, he's in The Sound of Music. Yep. Okay, so our next category is aesthetics. So for movies, we have a total possible score of 2, and I gave this full points. So 2 out of 2 for aesthetics. So
interesting.
Guessing Tori didn't. But in the same way, I will say with a caveat, this is an older film, and it is not perfect. However, I think that in the same way the plot has some flaws when you look at it through 2025 lenses, I think this film, when you look at it from 2025, has a lot of positives that we're not seeing in film anymore. And so I think for that reason, visually, I think this film is really good. So I took into account the auditory aspects of the music and the musical numbers, and I think they're written very well. I think the songs in and of themselves are written well, they're sung well, they're performed well. Julie Andrews' voice is just angelic, to say the least. So her singing is fantastic. Just the opening shot of the film over the hills of Austria, the fact that that was filmed completely in camera with a helicopter, everything you're seeing in the countryside of Austria is in the camera. There's no green screen, there's no CGI, there's no special effects, everything is actually there. And I feel like if this movie was made today, I think that in the making of this film, there is a lot on sound stages as far as the sets inside. But if this movie was made today, they probably would have filmed it all in Atlanta, Georgia, with one railing and then everything in green screen. And so the fact that everything you're seeing, especially the countryside of Austria, is just so visually impressive, I think that alone deserves merit because it's just not done today. People don't film movies this way anymore. The way that the like editing and the way the musical numbers are cut together, it still feels very cinematic in quality, but it still feels like you're getting the same like emotion and rhythm as if you were watching it on stage, but they're capitalizing on the medium of film. So for example, I think the biggest musical number that does this is the Do Re Mi song. You could visualize the way that looks on stage. It's just the dancing and choreography of your cast. And, you know, maybe there's a set piece of I don't know, a fountain or something that they kind of dance around. And then maybe some scenery moves behind them. But in this film, that musical number literally progresses from a picnic at the top of the mountains, and they're really there on the top of the mountains in Austria, and then throughout the entire town of Salzburg in Austria. And so the way that it cuts and focuses on the characters and highlights the aspects of the town is just really, really stunning, I think. And it's a very effective use of film as the medium of your media, and yet you're still getting all of kind of like the like warm fuzzies that you want from a stage play musical number, and yet this is how we've put it in front of a camera, and we've filmed it in Austria, and we're cutting through different locations and highlighting the town that these people live in, and yet still highlighting the different characters. I mean, the costume pieces in that number, like the way the different kids are moving, they're going from riding on bicycles to dancing around a fountain to, you know, at the beginning they're having a picnic, they're riding in a carriage, they're marching through a market. Like, all of these things are happening, and I think that this just that visual number has really set the bar for what a film adaptation of a stage play is supposed to be. And so I attribute that into this category as well, because I think there's a lot of modern musical movies that don't follow that same concept, that this is a stage play, but if we have film as our medium to utilize, we should be going beyond just having a static camera and our cast dancing a musical number facing the camera like it's a stage and never moving that camera or changing our scenery. And so that's just one example of one musical number in the film. But I think that this film really set the bar as far as movie musical adaptations of a stage play goes. And I'm not sure what like came first as far as the way that like what came first chronologically, what was developed first, released first, etc. But there are many movie adaptations of musicals even in the 60s, and not all of them meet the same, I would say, mainstream appeal that this movie has. They're either too far to the musical stage play audience to where your mainstream audience isn't quite gonna buy in. Like, for example, like Singing in the Rain, My Fair Lady, even like Dr. Dolittle came out around the 60s. Oklahoma. Those movie musicals are, while I think you could argue, Fiddler on the Roof, even, you could argue those are all very well done, but there are aspects of that film where visually, musically, and the way that that medium is presented to you in a visual and auditorial aspect, it's a little too much stage play that your mainstream audience just, there are parts where it's like, I'm bored. I don't want to watch a big dance number. I don't want to see, you know, I'm bored. Like this, I didn't come to watch a stage play. If I wanted to do that, I would go to the theater. I want to watch a movie. And so I think that, I mean, this might be a bold statement or a hot take, if you will, but I think that the Sound of Music just found that magic where we could find a way to present a stage play in the medium of film, and it has a widespread appeal to a film-going audience, and it works. I think there's a lot of people that you meet that are like, oh, I can't stand musicals. I think they're boring. Oh, no, I don't watch musicals. They just start leaping around the stage for no reason. And like, why are they dancing? Like they're doing choreography. Like, but then you talk to that same person, you're like, do you like the sound of music? Oh, I love the sound of music.
Right.
Who doesn't like the sound of music?
Sure.
And I think that credit deserves to be given to the aesthetic category of our score sheet. And I think that's because they've really capitalized on the medium of film and decided to make a movie about a stage play rather than filming a stage play and trying to just portray it on film. So that was a huge reason impacting kind of my decision here. I do think that there is some aspects where you can tell that some of the singing is dubbed over a little bit. You can tell where, you know, there are parts of this film visually that has aged. Even just the quality of the film itself has aged. I watched a remastered version like on DVD. That's how I watched it. And so I think for my like viewing experience, it wasn't on streaming. So the sound in my viewing was mixed really well. The audio, and you didn't have to constantly play, you know, tennis with the volume remote. I think the fact that they use the marionettes in this movie, those are real marionettes used by real puppeteers, and that's incredible work that it's a lost art. Like, genuinely, like, you just don't see that anymore. Again, if this was made today, it would all be CG. They would have had CG marionettes, like, moving around. Or, like,
an animated sequence.
Yeah, or an animated sequence. I do think that one aspect where I don't know if I think it's necessary, but at least in the DVD version of the film, there's kind of the opening credits, which I think it's nice. It plays the overture of what you would expect the overture of the stage play to be. I think that's appropriate. But then there's also an intermission, which you don't really need in home video. And then there's also an intra act. So kind of like when you were back from intermission and sitting down, and there's an orchestral piece that plays while the lights have gone down, but the curtains have not gone up yet. That is not really needed in this film. But I do think in 1965, it is a nice homage to theater as a medium, but it is a bit unnecessary. I had some, I also think there's a lot of positives with the costumes, with the vocals of even the kids sound really good. Again, I did do a little bit of like behind the scenes trivia looking, and the kids are there are more than 7 people singing on the audio of the kids, but I think it passes really well. Like, it does sound more full than just 7 voices singing, but I do think that it works for the film. And when you have a film as a medium, again, you can do things like that. You can dub, more backing vocals for your main cast. Like, that I think is an effective use of film. Like, we can blur those lines. Whereas if we were on stage, you'd only be hearing 7 people singing with your 7 kids with your adult characters. Yeah, and then in general, I think visually, just everything that's in camera that you see, I think is just very impressive, especially in this day and age. The cathedral is a real cathedral. I mean, visually, that's just extremely impressive. Like that old European, centuries old cathedral, the town itself, the Von Trapp's home, all of that, it's just visually very, very stunning. So I won't keep going on everything. I think I've kind of made my point, but that's the biggest reason that I gave it full points. And I do think musically, the music sounds really good, the vocals sound really good. Overall, I think it's just very strong visually, and I think especially in this day and age, people just don't make movies like this anymore. And I think that's sad, because I think that they really are not just presenting a musical theater medium to a film audience, to a mainstream audience, but they're also still presenting film as an art form and not just an entertainment form. So I think that it does have that entertainment value because it's appealing to a mainstream audience, but I still think they are respectful in that this storytelling should be artistic and have an artistic hand and be given to the audience with care. And I think that's reflected really well as well. So I gave it full points. So I think that Tori probably didn't,
okay.
but I did. So 2 out of 2 for me.
Totally fair. I give this 1 out of 2 points for aesthetics. So I think it's middle of the road, and I'll talk about why. I fully agree with you, though, about the music is absolutely timeless. It's classic. I think every stanza of every song is written so intentionally and performed so intentionally and with all of the right emotional nuances and things that you want from these pieces. So I think it's one of the best soundtracks and scores, I think, out there in regards to like classic musicals. I think when you could ask somebody who's never even seen The Sound of Music to name you a song, and they could name you at least one, even if it's just Do Re Mi. But I think that's just so wonderful, and I do love the costumes and sets. I completely mirror everything you said in regards to that. And I also want to talk about what you mentioned. I didn't expect you to mention it, but I had a note about it as well. Is the marionette work. And the reason that I think that is so cool is not just for the art form of the marionette, but also the significance of the culture of Austrian, Czech, and German culture to include marionettes. That is not something that you see a lot anymore, if at all. I feel like marionettes now, when they are brought up in media, is almost in like a jokey way, and it's never taken as like a serious art form. It's almost like a butt of a joke kind of art form now. And I love how they use it in this, and that yes, it's supposed to be like a silly, lighthearted performance for Dad and his friends, so it's not like it's used as a serious thing, but it is in a way a serious art, and you can see the effort that has gone in behind that and all of the choreography and how detailed and intricate. I was counting on one of the marionettes, I can't remember which one, but on one of the marionette characters, there's like 18 strings. And if you look up, and I don't believe that like Julie Andrews and the children are the ones actually marionetting them, but they're holding the tops of them, and you can see like all these intricate extra toggles coming off like all of these wooden beams, and it's just so impressive to me, and I love that they included that. If nothing else, just it continues to make you feel like you're in Austria, because the cultural significance is so prevalent in that sort of thing. And the last really positive thing I want to talk about before I kind of switch over to some negatives that I have is I think that this movie evokes a very special, impossible to really describe mood. And I know it's hard for me to even bring that up as a point because I really can't articulate it. But the Sound of Music as a whole evokes some sort of atmospheric mood that I have yet to find perfectly captured in any other musical, at least that I've seen. And that's really the best way I can describe it. So forgive me for not having more words, because I just feel like it's one of those things where when you're watching The Sound of Music, you feel like you're watching The Sound of Music, and you can't get that same feeling quite anywhere else. There's nothing else that really scratches the Sound of Music itch other than The Sound of Music. Like, there are some things where I'm like, I'm in the mood to watch, like a mystery. And there are lots of things that can kind of scratch that itch. But The Sound of Music is so unique in what it is and how it's built that it's like when you're in the mood to watch The Sound of Music, nothing else will satisfy. And I feel like there's something to be said for that sort of just mood that's painted from start to finish. I know mood is such a subjective kind of abstract idea. So I hate that I can't give something more solid behind it, but I just wanted to bring it up because it's something that I just continuously thought as I was rewatching this to prep for this. So it's like, there's just nothing like this. There's nothing like this out there other than this. It's one of a kind. Sound of Music is genuinely one of a kind, and I think that deserves its credit. Now, here are some of the problems that I have. I love, like you said, that there's very little green screen use, but there is a use for it once, and I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when they're driving in the car, the captain and the Baroness and Uncle Max, and they're driving in the car, and you can so obviously see that background that's moving around behind them is not real.
It's not green screen though. It's called rear projection.
Okay, so it's rear projection.
But it is fake. I will concede. Yep, it is.
And I know that some people could probably come at me and be like, that's the best they could do in the 60s. I agree. But in 2025, it is jarring to look at, especially when we've had so many wonderful practical sets leading up to that scene. That scene feels aesthetically so out of place. And I can't imagine it would have been crazy difficult if they can do a scene where they're all in a cart wagon being pulled through the streets of Austria. There is a road out there that they could have driven a car on and done that scene. Like, I have to argue that it had to have been possible. They can do it with Seven Kids and Maria. They could have done it with the Baroness and Captain.
Mm-hmm.
So that scene, like the moment it comes on, I'm like, that we are not in Austria anymore, Toto. You know, that kind of feeling. And so I couldn't stand that.
It did not bother me at all.
Really?
I feel like if I'm watching a movie from the 60s, I expect things like that. So it doesn't bother me whatsoever. Like the texture of the film showing up, or like the lighting being off.
See, I'm going to talk about that.
I knew you were going to talk about lighting, but I just, before you get into it, I will just say from my perspective, like, it does not bother me at all. I expect it with a movie that old.
That's fair.
So, but I think it's fair.
But I'm going to talk about
criticism. Yeah, go ahead.
So my second note before I get into the lighting is sound mixing for the music part. Fantastic. Love it. I have no critiques. However, when we are not in a musical number, I have some issues sometimes with sound. There are, and this is going to sound nitpicky, and people can come at me if they want, but it's what I could hear. Are you familiar with like the idea of room tone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for those of you who may not be familiar with that, what room tone is it's good practice whenever you're filming in an indoor location or outdoor also, is that when you're done with all your dialogue or whatever, you should get 30 to 45 seconds where nobody's talking or moving around, and you literally just record the sound of the room. Because even if we're not actively thinking about the room, the tone of the room, all spaces have ambient sound. Whether or not you can like hear it or not, it exists. But it's part of what makes the acoustics of people talking sound natural or unnatural from an editing standpoint. And there are times where there will be like talking in a scene, and I'm pretty sure it must have been dubbed over or audio from one edited over video of another, and the room tone changes or disappears halfway through a conversation. And it happened multiple times. And so, okay, sure, maybe someone who's not a weirdo like me wouldn't even notice it, but I did a lot.
I did not notice it at all. So,
all right.
Casual viewer, film student viewer.
So, but I think it's, the way to remedy this is that you lay room tone underneath all sound always. And it kind of felt like maybe they didn't, or maybe that was not a practice at the time. I don't really
possible.
know. Maybe that's things like that are what caused the practice to become common. But I wanted to mention that as well. And then my last negative thing is the lighting is sometimes really poor, and it doesn't feel like intentional or artistic choices some of the time. The biggest example I can give for this is the scene right before and during the musical number 16 going on 17. And there are really important conversations well, I wouldn't say really important because I just said that in other categories that I didn't really think it was that important. But if you want to argue and say that like this conversation, you know, is significant between Liesl and Rolf for whatever reason, I would like to see their faces. I understand that it's nighttime in the story and it's raining and probably the only real source of light that they have is the moon. But this is where the suspension of disbelief comes into play in regards to things like theater and movies. It's really difficult to keep track of the performance of your actor if you cannot see their face. And I understand that sometimes you're going to choose to hide somebody's face for whatever reason, you know, whether that's to evoke a sense of mystery or like somebody's trying to, you know, hide their own thoughts or emotions. But if your characters are having an open-hearted conversation, it feels counterproductive to have Rolf's head cutting Liesl's face like this, where all I can see is the corner of her mouth moving, and I can't see anything she's doing with her eyes or expression as she looks up toward Rolf. So either reposition your actors or reposition your light, or throw a little fill light in on this side so that the shadow while there won't be so black and white. There are different things that you could do, and that is not the only time that this happens. There's another time where I don't remember exactly the conversation that's happening, but the captain is in like the main foyer room, the kind of the room that we see a lot, and Maria is either going up or down the stairs, and they're kind of talking back to each other, and there's like a whole pillar that's just like blocking Maria, and I'm like, I just want to see her while she's talking. I don't think that it should be such a crime for me to want to see the character that's speaking to me. And it happens also later, also in the gazebo. It happens all the time in the gazebo when...
Which the irony is the gazebo was a soundstage.
Right.
So they had full control of the environment.
And so every time we're in the gazebo, we just can't see each other, I guess. And
it's always dark in the gazebo.
Right. And so there's this point, it's the point where it's Maria and the captain in the gazebo, and she sings I Must Have Done Something Good.
Yeah.
Kind of when they're fully confessing that they love each other and all that stuff. And there are moments that I can tell this is specifically meant to be silhouette. And then we switch. And once again, and it almost looks creepy. You ever been like out walking at night and you like look and there's like a cat and all you see is like the eye shine and you're like, ugh. So that is Maria at one point in the gazebo because her entire face is shadowed.
I don't remember seeing that.
Yes, I have to point it out. But she's talking to the captain and she's completely shadowed, but her eyes catch just a little bit of light when they move. And so she looks like a cat under a car in the middle of the night, and it bothered me so bad. And so the whole time I was like, if it was intentional, like built silhouette work, or, you know, I'm hiding from because of my shame or because of my cowardice, or like something emotionally meant to like. But no, these are moments where they're supposed to be open and honest with each other, and we're peeling back the layers and covering you with we might have put a paper bag on her head. Like, it just felt counterproductive to me, some of those lighting moments, and that really bothered me. So that was my biggest problem, and the reason that I gave 1 out of 2 points for aesthetics.
Wow. All right. All because of the cutting people's faces with shadow.
I'm just saying, I want to see your face.
That's fair. That's fair. I didn't notice any of those things when I was watching, so
okay.
But that's why we have this podcast. So, because maybe you did, and you're maybe like, Holland's an idiot. How could you not know that?
Don't say that. Don't say that about
Say it in the comments. I love it.
You want to get raked?
I feed off of your hatred. It fuels my rage.
Yeah.
All right, so our second to last category is always personal taste and preference. We are only allowed 2 points for this category out of our total score of 10. So my score for personal taste out of 2 is 1.5 out of 2. So I don't watch this movie or rewatch this movie frequently, but it is one that I completely enjoy when I do. I think that the sentiment you said about how there's just some mood that you feel watching The Sound of Music, I think that's true. I feel that way when watching this movie, and so I genuinely enjoy this movie every time I see it. It's just cozy. It feels homey to me somehow. It also is a fond movie because it's one of the few musicals that my mom likes, so we will watch it together often. And just as a film, and as films continue to be made and musicals continue to be adapted to film, I think this movie just becomes more and more endearing to me because it's becoming more and more of a rarity. And so I appreciate that. I enjoy watching just the art form of it. I love that everything you see, with the exception of the background of the car when they're driving, but everything you see is really there. They're really in Salzburg, Austria. You can really visit these places. People do. Apparently the people in Austria don't think this movie's anything that notable, but they love having the tourists, well, I don't know if they love having the tourists. I've never talked to them, but I'm sure it's good for their economy to have some tourists, as long as you're respectful and not annoying.
That's true of anytime you're visiting anywhere, by the way.
Anytime you're a tourist, please be respectful and not annoying. But yeah, so I just genuinely enjoy it. It's not a full points. It's not full 2 out of 2, but I mean, I have when I'm watching this, I have no real negatives in my experience of the film. So 1.5.
Okay. For me, for personal taste and preference, I gave this a full 2 out of 2 points. This is one of those movies that I watch multiple times a year, and it never really gets old for me. This musical has so much heart and charm and magic. And like you said, that's becoming so much more of a rarity nowadays. It's almost like, in a way, it almost feels like movies have become easier in some capacities just because technology has gotten better to make. So it's almost like 3 hours of footage, like content. I can't imagine how much they had unedited content and how much time that took. And with the technology as it was in the 60s, things did take longer. Editing took longer. Like, everything was so much more of a process. And so it's just something very special to me. And it kind of evokes that mood that there's just nothing like it but itself. Multiple scenes make me emotional. I get choked up a lot, in good ways, like, in not just like in, oh dang, it's making me cry again, but it's just like, I feel like there are some moments in this movie that are just impactful every time and are performed in a way that kind of grip my heart, in all of the ways that you want media to. It's a favorite and a classic. And, I think that this is one that I put on when I'm like sick, because it just makes me feel better, or sad because it just makes me feel better. It's just like one of those movies. It's kind of healing in its way to like revisit it again. It's like an old friend. Like, sometimes you just get a little bit of like healing from it, just being around it, experiencing it again. So that's why I gave it full points.
Alrighty, and then our last category is creativity, so total possible score of 1. I gave this full points. I think this film is an absolute icon of a film. The music and the story has stood the test of time, and it continues to have mass appeal. Even with new generations, I think it's become a part of common and popular culture and knowledge. So I think that, I can't speak to it because I don't hang out with a lot of, people under the age of 25, but I do think that a lot of people have heard of this film. I think that most people still, at least in American culture or Western culture, they probably still learn the music scale from a song from this movie. I did when I was in elementary school. We learned Do Re Mi, and then we watched this scene from this movie, and like that was how I still remember the notes in the scale. But yeah, and it's been parodied by so many different TV shows and movies, and there's stage play adaptations. There's a stage play coming to the local performing arts center, and it's The Sound of Music. It's going to be on stage and coming to a stage near you, and community theaters and school plays, and so it's continued to persist in popular culture, and you can't say that about every movie or every musical. So I think that alone just warrants the credit from creativity, because this film really does have such a big impact. So I give it full points.
Awesome. So for me, for creativity, I also gave this one full point. I think it's absolutely iconic. I think there's something to be said for a musical that does not just secure its place in musical history, but also in film history and in pop culture history. This is not the film that really made Julie Andrews famous, I'd say. That was probably more Mary Poppins if we're talking chronological. But I think having the two so close together really secured her place as an icon of like musical film history, and how well she acts just and performs and sings, and just the all-rounder that she is. I think that it's just such a milestone in film history that, it's going to be a film that's talked about, I think, as long as movies are being made, honestly. I know that might be presumptuous of me to predict, but we're going on 60 years. It's 60 years this year that this movie's been around, and people still watch it and fall in love with it as if it came out yesterday. And this is one of those films that feels like a film that will last until movies are no more. Which, will that ever happen? I don't know, when the world comes crumbling to an end and the apocalypse happens, maybe then, we'll stop talking about The Sound of Music. Yeah. But until then, I think it's going to be prevalent. It's unfortunate because it's crazy, because you watch this movie and you see all of these wonderful actors who have taken these roles. And then you realize that because years have passed, that some of these people are no longer with us. Like Christopher Plummer passed away. 2 of the Von Trapp kids have passed. And as the years go by, it's almost like, in a way, it's time capsule-y. And sure, the story takes place in the 1930s, so it's kind of a time capsule within a time capsule. But it's, again, one of those films that, while it takes place in a time and was released in a specific time, it stands the test of time. And I don't, and again, because to echo a thing I said previously, is there's nothing like it but itself. I think that will continue to stay true. So.
Yep. Actually, I think if the apocalypse happens, people probably will still be talking about The Sound of Music, because I read a fun fact that some government in Europe, I can't remember, it may have been the UK, it may have been, it's some government. Allegedly, the rumor was that they planned that if a nuclear strike hits, that they will air the film The Sound of Music to try and boost morale.
It would work. I'm saying it would work.
Somebody asked the government if it was true, and they said they couldn't comment on anything that would be related to security measures.
That's
allegedly.
Amazing.
That's just what I heard. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's like an urban legend. So I'm not trying to spread like misinformation here, but I mean, funny. It would probably work.
Yeah, probably.
It's a very optimistic film.
It is. It is.
So,
with that all said, what is your overall score?
My final score for The Sound of Music is 8 out of 10.
Mine is also 8 out of 10.
We matched. What a
matched.
great end to our fall season.
Yes. So before we get into lightning round, I forgot to mention this earlier, but this is our last episode before we go on holiday break. So if you are watching these as they come out, then we will not be back until the new year after this. So enjoy your holidays. But
yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we jump into some lightning round questions?
No, I did hear an interesting point though. I think it was probably on some like social media post or something. But I thought about it while I was watching this film. This is just like this is not really about the film itself, but in like the time when this movie was coming out, like when the movie's coming out, when the movie's set, so like the 1930s, like radio had existed.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember as a kid thinking how the kids are like, we don't know how to sing, and thinking, that's so dumb. How do you not know how to sing? Like, who's never heard of music or never sung? But like back in the 1930s, unless you had a radio, which radios mostly broadcasted news, it was not like a radio station that we know of today. You didn't hear music unless somebody was singing to you,
or you were going to the
played an
orchestra
instrument, or you went to a musical performance.
Yeah.
Or you went to church.
Yeah.
And other than those instances, and in this film it seems like the only church is like the our monasteries or abbeys, and so the monks and the nuns, it doesn't seem like people are publicly attending their singing services. That's just part of their like community.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you weren't around people singing in general, like you didn't hear it. Like you didn't hear a song unless you went to a symphony and heard it played, or you learned how to play an instrument and you played it yourself. So I think it was interesting when I was watching the movie this time. I was like, oh, I never thought about that. Like these kids, the ones that can't remember like their mother singing to them, like they haven't heard music. If their dad doesn't let it in the house and they don't ever leave the grounds, like they'd have no exposure. And to me, that's so sad.
It is sad.
Music's a big part of like my family's life.
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine living in a world where you didn't have so much accessibility to music.
Right.
So the sound of music, like that has a bigger impact, I think, in that context than what we like understand it today. So
for sure.
That was just a little side note. I meant to mention a little bit of that in my categories and I forgot. So it's kind of anecdotal and not really related to the movie anyways, but yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. You
Fun
ready
facts.
for lightning round?
I am.
Okay. Favorite character?
Maria, probably. Yeah.
Same.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Maria. Do you have a least favorite character?
Rolf.
Same.
He's pretty sucky.
He sucks.
He sucks.
Or the
guy with the glasses.
Yeah, he's like,
that's like,
learn.
Yeah, who's like, oh, where are you going, Captain?
Yeah.
Like, him. He's pretty bad too.
Do you have a favorite scene? And this can include a song number if you wish.
A favorite scene? That's a really hard one because it would probably be a musical number, and all of them are so good. That's really hard.
Do you want me to give mine?
Are you going to ask me later what my favorite musical number is? Because it might be different.
Now, if you want to give two, like give your favorite scene and then give your favorite musical number, you're welcome to do that.
That's a hard question though. But I would say my gut reaction is, I think one of my favorite scenes is the Do Re Mi musical. I just think visually it's just so stunning. Like, especially after seeing what film has attempted with musicals since this movie came out, and even before. But I think it's so, in my opinion, I think it's so flawlessly executed. And it's just done so well, and I think it's just so iconic. My favorite musical number, though, I think would be How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria. I just think it's so funny.
It is fun.
And I think it's funny. And I had a friend named Maria. I had to travel for work, and I met another woman named Maria, and we were at this conference together, and I was like the second day of the conference, I was like, but I really just want to know, how do you solve a problem like Maria? And she was like, oh, no. But I was like, I tried to like set it up kind of slow. I set it up better than that. But I was like, set it up, and she was just like, oh my. And so it's just like, I can't meet anyone named Maria without thinking about that song. It's just so funny. And all of the things in that song that I like, if somebody called me all of those things that they called Maria, I would be flattered. Like, honestly.
A flibbity-gibbet? You know, be called a flibbity-gibbet?
Yeah, but like all the things that they say about Maria, like, is just, I think it's very admirable. Like, it doesn't fit in an abbey, but she's not a bad person.
Right. They're not really dragging her.
No, she just doesn't, she's not an asset to the abbey. But she has all these other, like, what I think are really admirable qualities.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
My favorite scene is also a song, and it's that first scene. It's that first scene where the captain sings Edelweiss and Liesel joins in. And I just cry every time.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but it's just something about his voice, and you can almost like feel his patriotic convictions while he's singing. And then he invites Liesel to join him, which feels like a significant moment between him and his oldest daughter. And I don't know. And then you can kind of see the gears kind of spinning behind Maria's eyes. Like, it's a lovely scene, I think, and it does a lot for a lot of characters. So plus I just think the song is beautiful. But
I always thought the song had a little bit of a double meaning. Like, when he's singing it with his children, he's singing about like the like message, like Edelweiss is like a symbol, you know, because it's a flower. And I feel like the flower was his wife. And so it's like, you know, small and white, clean and bright, you know, you look happy to meet me. And he's singing Bless My Homeland Forever, and he's talking about like his home, you know, and his wife and his home and his family. And then at the end it's about Austria,
right?
And so I always felt like that those two songs in those two places were really poignant.
It's so beautiful.
Because it's like he has that conviction about, you know, grief and loss and love, and then still also about like grief and loss and love, but now about his homeland and his country.
Instead of his like physical house and home. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful song. Beautiful scene.
It is.
Okay, next question. If you were in Maria's shoes, what would an ideal Saturday with the Von Trapp children look like to you?
If I were in Maria's shoes, and I'm in like their time frame, like I'm in the 1930s. I don't know. I feel like what they did, like the picnic was a good Saturday activity, you know? I feel like that would be an ideal Saturday. Or if, you know, it was warm enough, you could go swimming in the lake. The canoe is a good idea. Yeah. So I feel like the beginning of the Do-Re-Mi and the end of the Do-Re-Mi, those would be pretty good. And like in the middle.
Yeah.
As well, you know?
So just that scene.
Just that whole scene. But that's a lot. Like that takes place over several days. But I feel like the two parts of that scene, which is like having fun with the kids, would probably be either like the canoe, although I don't know if I would want to be in a canoe with 7 kids. Like thing's gonna tip over. That was a disaster waiting to happen. But the picnic, not a bad idea.
I
feel like then they can like all go have fun and like spread out. It's good like stress relief for all of them, you know.
Run all the energy out.
Yeah.
If I was in Maria's shoes, I think I would take a Saturday and I would take over the kitchen and have the cook teach us all like how to bake something.
That's
or something
a smart
like
idea.
That. I think that would be fun.
I thought you were going to say to go to the library.
That would also be fun.
And that makes me think of Sokka in Avatar. It's like, I want my vacation at the library.
But I just thought that would be something fun to do because it's obvious the house is big and big enough to entertain people. So they probably have a kitchen with at least one staff member in there. I mean, we already know they kind of have like a housekeeper and stuff.
Mhm.
So I think it would be fun to take the Von Trapps into the kitchen and say, teach us to do something fun. And
We're all going to make
strudel or whatever, you know. So I think that would be cool. Okay, next question. Do you think that the historical accuracy should have been a bigger concern? Or do you think that the creative liberties that were taken were for the best?
I think that this could be a controversial topic or controversial answer. I do think I did read a little bit of background before we recorded. And I know that the concern of the children of the Von Trapp parents were that their father was not as stern and as stoic and strict as portrayed in the film, and they wanted him softened. And the filmmakers were like, it's not going to happen. Like, and Maria Von Trapp had sold the rights to her story, so she did not have any like legal, weight. So I understand. I think that's a valid concern, and if it were my dad, I would probably feel the same sentiment. However, I do think there is some validity. The director's response was that we're not going to do that. The point of the film is that he's a hard man and he needs Maria to come soften him, and we're not writing a biography, we're trying to make a film. Mm-hmm. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But his kind of sentiment was like, no, we're changing things. We're not being a historical adaptation. We're making a film.
Yeah.
And it's inspired by this story, but we're still making a film. This is not a real story. These are real people, but this story is not, we're not trying to be true to the film. And while I think historical validity can be a concern, I don't see this film as an adaptation of the Von Trapp's life. I see it as an adaptation of the musical. And so I think that if you want to read their biography, I think Maria Von Trapp wrote 2 books. Mm-hmm. Both of them were biographies. I think that would absolutely be worth the read. I haven't personally read them, but I would definitely be willing to. I would like to, actually. I should check the library. But I don't think this film, if it had struggled to be, or if it had strived to be as accurate as possible, I don't think it would have been the success it is today. So I think just based on that, I would say, no, I don't think it should have been more of a concern, because I think what it set out to do, it did, and it worked, and it's successful at that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with setting out to be a successful movie musical inspired by real life people, but at least acknowledging we're telling a different story. I think that's respectful, is to at least acknowledge like this, we're not going for historical accuracy here. So personally, no, I don't think it's not a concern to me, because the intent was made very clear, and the filmmakers and the writers and the directors didn't say, this is the real story, this is what really happened, every detail is accurate. I've never, at least in my knowledge, living 60 years after the film, I've never seen anybody hold it up as the most accurate representation of someone's life. So
yeah,
that's just my take.
I agree. I think that if you want the historical accurate version, then go read the memoir. It's there for you. Mm-hmm. She wrote it down for you. But I agree that sometimes when you're adapting a real story, in order to keep like character dynamics interesting and move plots at a reasonable pace, you do have to take those creative liberties. And while I think that I can understand from a personal familial standpoint the concern of changing like character, mm-hmm. of somebody who was literally like your dad or your brother or something. So I understand not wanting character traits to be switched, but at the end of the day, if the real character of Captain Von Trapp makes for a less interesting story, let's change it up to make this story more mm-hmm. interesting.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. Okay, last question. Are there any other actors that you could see in the role of Maria and Captain Von Trapp, modern or classic? And if so, who are they?
Oh, gosh. I don't think I could ever see anyone other than Julie Andrews.
I agree.
I mean,
I thought about this while I wrote the question, and I thought for like an hour.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody else.
Mm-mm.
I can't.
No. I can't think of anyone other than Julie Andrews whatsoever. For Captain Von Trapp, I feel like Christopher Plummer's just, it's so iconic at this point. I mean, maybe you could go, I think Christopher Plummer's background was like a theater actor.
He was,
and
yeah.
like a stage actor. So I feel like another like very classically trained dramatic theater actor could fill the shoes, because I think the character's not as strong as Maria.
Or nuanced, yeah.
Yeah. So somebody like, I don't know, maybe like a young Michael Caine, or like
even potentially maybe like Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like Hugh Jackman has a different vibe altogether.
Yeah. Maybe like Ian McKellen.
Okay.
Somebody like that.
Okay.
But the singing wouldn't be
right.
I mean, I don't know, because yeah, I don't know. Just from an acting standpoint, I could see like a traditional, like classically trained stage actor doing
That's fair.
him. But it would have to be somebody that has like the physical presence that he has. So that's what I'm trying to think. Like, I think there's a lot of very good dramatic actors in film, but I don't think they necessarily have the same physical presence that you would need. Like, for example, I've seen some of like Timothée Chalamet's dramatic work, clips of it here and there, and I think he's a very good actor, but he doesn't have that physical presence so that I think is needed for that character.
Even just his build is very different.
It is.
And it does make a difference in a role like this.
Right. So it's like, I wouldn't pick him as like a possibility.
Sure.
So I don't know.
It's hard because I feel
maybe like Henry Cavill, like physically he could kind of fit that same.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I could almost see somebody like Chris Hemsworth physically like that as well. But again, it comes down to the singing. Yeah. These are not men that sing to my knowledge.
Right.
And that's still something that's important.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. So
I don't know. Maybe they just cast it perfectly and there's just nothing else to do.
Well, I think that's another reason that like this movie has not been remade, because I don't think anyone wants anyone other than the original.
They did like a live version, remember? And I think Carrie Underwood played Maria, but I don't remember who played Captain Von Trapp.
Yeah. But even then, Carrie Underwood is a phenomenal musical
but she didn't
artist
quite
and
have
has
the
talent.
Same...
Right. It's not Julie Andrews.
Right.
So it's just not gonna.
Yeah. And again, it's no shade to Carrie Underwood. She's just not Julie Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else to say?
One other fun fact: they almost cast Audrey Hepburn the same way that she played in My Fair Lady.
But she can't sing all that yodeling and stuff, right?
Well, she can't. She doesn't sing in My Fair Lady either.
True.
She was dubbed.
True. That would have been sad.
Yeah. But instead, they got Julie Andrews.
So
Audrey Hepburn, I think, could have worked as
acting wise, but I like that Julie Andrews did all of her own.
Yeah, I still don't think she could ever compete or compare to Julie Andrews.
Right,
but I'm saying, to answer your last question, I would say
it's a possibility.
I could see her like physically fitting the role, but you just can't. I don't think you can be the original, cast. So
totally fair.
No. So those are my last thoughts. I'm sorry.
Mine as well.
We're going way long here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. We hope you had a good time, because we know that we did. If you have an idea of what we should review next, you can let us know. So you can leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube, or you can use our suggestion box on our website, which is lionandmousepodcast.com. Also on our website, there's links to our show notes, like our actual pieces of paper that we write on. We scan those in so that you can look at them and look at our notes. You can also print your own show notes there if you want to follow along. We've been posting what our upcoming topics are on our Instagram, so you can go look at those and be like, oh, I'm also going to have thoughts about this, and you can compare your notes to ours and see how many of your opinions line up with ours. If you could, though, please review this episode wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps make us visible to people who may not see us. This is especially true of YouTube because everything is algorithm based. So you do all the YouTube things like, comment, subscribe, word of mouth, share links, those sorts of things. It really helps us a lot, and we appreciate that support. Thank you so much for listening. We will catch you in the next one.